Think Live Be production. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hooray.
And what an early morning it is.
It is. The sun's coming up.
Luckily there's this umbrella thing here that I can block myself. We have like a, what would you call this?
Photography umbrella.
A photography umbrella happens to be in the room, and so it's kind of blocking the sun. We should just leave that there.
Yeah.
Normally I'm blinded by the sun and it's hard to focus. But it's super early. I feel like I'm not 100% firing yet. I had my coffee already because I don't want to start the podcast and be like sipping my coffee with you guys. I don't think you'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I wish that I had more. I just want like a little bit more coffee.
I know you do.
I always want just like I finished the cup and I'm like, God, I just want like 3 more sips. We have cappuccinos and Pat makes the absolute best.
Thank you.
We have this machine that it's pretty easy to use. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can squeak something out of it pretty easily, but a lot of it is automated, so it's like it's a nice espresso machine.
Yeah, and we have set up the exact like drink that we drink. Like,
yeah,
you can program.
You can program it in.
Yeah, and so I can do it myself, but it doesn't taste as good as when Pat does it. That is just the truth. It's not just a ploy to get him to make me coffee.
Yes, it is.
And cappuccinos.
Yes, it is.
It's truly better. But anyways, welcome to Seeking the Best. This is our podcast where we talk about overcoming the hurdles of being a realtor in this crazy industry. And gosh, I feel like this year has been just filled with hurdles that we're jumping through.
I know. It's nonstop.
It's nonstop. This has been a good week, though. I feel, well, it's been a short week. It's Memorial Day week, so we didn't have Monday.
Right.
So that's maybe why it feels good, because it's a short week. But no, I had some wins. Can I share them with you?
Sure.
I know we're supposed to do small wins at the end of the episode.
But you can start it.
Well,
you can do them now.
So it's always like, okay, maybe it's validation is the best way to put it, which I don't necessarily think that I need in my, like, I've never had a boss. So, you know, I don't have somebody that tells me, good job.
Yeah. You're not out there looking for recognition. That way lies madness.
It does. But it's nice sometimes when something happens that you cause to happen and you see the result and you're like, I did that. And then to have somebody else acknowledge that happened because of the actions that you took, that feels good. I can understand why people like that feeling. So I'll tell you what it was. So real quick stories. We have two deals going that both are supposed to close in a couple days. Actually, tomorrow. They're both supposed to close tomorrow. And they both were kind of going south. We needed a condo that, if you guys work with condos, then you probably understand, because I think this is a problem across the country, not just in Florida. But there's a lot of lawsuits that happen with condos, and then lenders find that risky. Because obviously they don't know what's going to happen at the end result of the lawsuit. And so they don't like to loan if there's some sort of litigation against the developer or things like that. And so we went under contract on a condo, and I knew that there was a lawsuit, but I also knew that it wasn't related to the construction of the building. So it shouldn't be a problem. But then we got back the letter that stated there's 4 things going on in that community. And everybody was trying to get answers as to what are these other lawsuits? What are these other lawsuits? And the condo association manager would not answer the question. And I called and got involved. I was like, I'll get to the bottom of this, as I like to do, even though it's not necessarily dollar producing activity. And I called the condo association manager and I asked a different question. Instead of assuming they were lawsuits and saying, what can you tell me about these lawsuits, or what is the purpose of these lawsuits?
And they've probably been told we're not allowed to talk about any
exactly.
of that, right?
They're not allowed to talk about lawsuits. So their default answer to everybody else,
can't talk about it.
Can't talk about it.
Right.
And I asked a different question, which was, so I know what this one lawsuit is. The other 3, can you tell me that those are not lawsuits? And the person said, yeah. And she's like, that's true. And I said, so those other 3 things are insurance claims, not lawsuits. And she's like, yeah. And so within what had taken like 2 weeks of people asking and trying to get answers and emailing big, long emails, like, can you tell me if the lawsuits fall within one of these things?
Right. So with it, yeah. So then she'd say, I can't tell you about that because
exactly.
You're asking if they're all, yeah.
And so within 10 seconds, I had resolved that one final thing, and then we had clear to close. And then, so that felt good. And then the other part was a low appraisal and just getting through that negotiation where, buyer does not want to pay more than appraised value. Even though a couple years ago they'd been begging to. They don't want to pay more than appraised value. I don't blame them. I understand, et cetera, et cetera. And being able to walk her through the big picture and conceding on a inspection credit that had been negotiated after the fact, and proving the point that this is my advice to every buyer and seller. If you just give a little, like be slightly flexible. I'm not saying you have to meet them in the middle or anything like that. Be slightly flexible. You'll probably be able to achieve the outcome that you're looking for. But
especially if you're the first one to make a move.
Right? But if you stick in the mud and say, no, I'm not doing anything, that is the fastest way to kill a deal.
Yeah.
So.
Don't make your decisions based off of emotion?
Well, 100%. But I mean, I don't know that she was trying to make it based on emotion.
No, they never are trying to do that or whatever, but it's like it's hard for people, I've given them this and this and this and this. I'm not doing any more. Like it's like
Can I tell you, so the Harvard, everybody knows what Harvard is, right? They have a school of negotiation, and you can actually go and attend these events like live or not live. Well, you can attend them in person, but they also have like virtual things where you can actually attend Harvard-led negotiation classes and get like a certificate. And I read the little newsletter, like I've subscribed to the little newsletter that they send out, and they always talk about I forget what the acronym is, but they always talk about alternatives, and people come to a negotiation with the understanding of a better alternative, So if a seller has a better alternative than to drop the price by $15,000 or $20,000 or whatever the gap is, then they're going to negotiate with that in mind. So you have to understand their position. And if you have a better alternative, which in this case, they both said they did, right? But if you truly have a better alternative, like there's another unit or there's another house down the street that's less, that wasn't on the market when we made this offer. If this doesn't work out, we'll just go buy that one. That puts you in a better position of negotiation if you can point out, I have a better alternative than this one, and you don't.
Yeah.
Because you have competition. So it's all about like the background. What is the alternative to making this work? And then that whoever has the better alternative situation
always
is going to have the upper hand in the negotiation.
It's like when it's like if we sell a one of our rental properties, it's not our primary residence. If we decide to sell it, it's because we're looking for the right price and all of those things. It's like we have all the hand in that position because of just your situation.
Yeah.
So then, it's the same. There's always going to be one person that's got the advantage.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily know.
Right.
In that situation, you don't necessarily know what their deal is. That's where picking up the phone.
It's also why it's so important as when you're talking to your co-op agent that you give the right amount of information and not all of the information.
Well, yes,
right?
But that's the thing. Like a lot of people just don't.
These co-op agents, I've heard you on the phone ask open-ended questions to them, and they just talk and talk and talk and show their entire hand, and then it's like, okay, well, now I know exactly what to do for my buyer or seller.
Well, it's gosh, I don't know why I'm going down this path, but I mean, truly, like, we are real estate agents we're not all equal. We don't all deserve the same pay. And, negotiation is one of the biggest parts of being paid top dollar. And you have to be able to show to sellers or buyers that you are worth the extra money because you're a better negotiator. And it's hard to illustrate that in a consultation with people. And yet there used to be scripts. I mean, there still are, but there's scripts for that. It's like, what's the reason a seller might not want to list with you is because you're charging more commission or, compensation is the new fancy word. If you're charging more compensation and that's the script is like, well, other than the other agent offering less commission, is there any other reason you wouldn't work with me? Well, no, you seem great. Marketing's great, blah, 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 blah. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what concerns me about that is that the other agent was so quick to give away their own money. What are they going to do when it's yours?
Yeah.
That's how you illustrate the skill of negotiation. I'm negotiating our own compensation fee. If I'm so quick to give away our own compensation, how will I act when I'm representing yours?
I want the deal so bad and I need it to close so quickly. I need it to close that I'm willing to give away my money just to get it.
Yeah.
Then that person, what are they going to be saying to the other agent in order to make sure your house sells?
Yeah. Anyways, that's not what we're talking about today.
No,
but it was a fun little
Sure.
dive into negotiation. I think like when you first get your license, you don't like, what the word negotiation means, but you don't really understand.
No, not until you get in the middle of it with an agent who's been in the business for 20 years and they run all over you.
Yeah. And you don't, and you also have to be able to explain it to the customer or the client, like that it's not about getting like everything. That's not what negotiation. If it was just you're going to get everything, then there's no point in us even talking. I'll just send this, and then if they say no, we move on to the next person and we send it in, and if they say no, then we move on until you get what you want. That's not what negotiation is. Anyways, I digress. Yeah. Today we're talking about, I did mention it, dollar producing versus non-dollar producing activities. May I explain?
Mm-hmm.
So I was rereading the MREA book again, and this time what's interesting? I've read that book a million times, but I got to like the last section, which is receive a million, and it really didn't have any highlights or dog ears. And I'm like, have I just never read this section? Have I gotten to the end of or close to the end and said, I'm not ready for that? I'm not sure. But it really wasn't as worn as the rest of the book. But it's a good reminder. I always read it at least once a year. I try to read it because it's a good refresher on the models and am I doing the right things? Am I focused on the right activities? And one of the things that is all over that book and any business related book, it talks about the 80-20 rule. And if you're not familiar, which I always feel like everybody is, but of course, there's always somebody who's never heard of something, right? And you're hearing it for the first time. So the 80-20 rule is this principle in life that was discovered originally by an Italian, I believe he was a farmer. And he noticed that most of the land was owned by a small amount of people in Italy. And that became known as the Pareto principle. And it essentially means that 80% of your outcome results from 20% of the causes or inputs. So 20% of your effort is going to lead to 80% of your results. And so if you really think about that and then ask yourself, like, what are the 20% what am I doing every day that's causing 80% of my results? And think about, like, what does your day look like? So I'm going to give an example, because today, my RTC is out of town and I'm training another admin. And so my day doesn't really have any space for lead generation, because I've got two pending files that we have to get started. We have a new listing that we have to get started. And all of that is administrative stuff that isn't my job. And yet somebody's got to train this other person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so those days can feel frustrating. And even if you don't have a team, you still can run into those days, because
you run into it probably more often.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, for sure. Yeah, you bring up a good point. If you don't have any leverage whatsoever, then
your whole week is doing that.
So imagine if I kept doing every day, and I'm not saying that training isn't part of your 20%. Like, when you start to own a business, that does become part of your part of the activities that you have to do to make sure that the leverage is doing the things they need to do. So I'm not suggesting that it's like all a waste of time. But if I every day over the course of like 90 days didn't do any lead generation, like all of the biggest chunk of my day was all towards paperwork, admin stuff. If I just kept doing that over and over and over again and didn't get myself back on track, in 90 days, I won't have any new business.
Right.
And so
that's called the roller coaster.
It's called the roller coaster, where you
up, down, down.
Yeah, you're like, okay, this week I'm going to really focus on lead generation and I'm going to make, 20 contacts a day. And you sit down and you start calling and you do it and you focus, 4 hours a day over and over and over. And then all of a sudden appointments start to happen, and then showings start to happen. And then you get busy with the clients and customers that you're working with, and you stop doing the lead gen.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start writing offers, which is great.
And then you're like, I don't know. These people are all under contract. Now what do I, then you start over again. And then it's up and then down again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I'm going to get a little bit off. Well, no, it's on topic. When I think about yesterday and dealing with negotiation, that is to me a dollar producing activity. As part of your like core job as a real estate professional is to negotiate, and that ensures that the deal gets done. The other one, calling the condo association, anyone can do that. And so the transaction coordinator or the mortgage company, the title company, anybody can do that and get those answers. It doesn't need to be you. And yes, I like it was a nice pat on the back, like, oh, yay, Catherine, you did it. You got us a clear to close. At the same time, though, and it felt good in the moment, but at the same time, it was like, that's one of those things where you might mistake that for dollar producing because you feel like you've achieved moving the ball towards closing. But in reality, you didn't actually do anything to produce new dollars. Like, that would have closed, because at the end of the day, those weren't lawsuits that were going to hold up closing, right? So I didn't make or break that closing from happening. I just stepped in, did somebody else's job, and then I felt good about it. So, but it took some back and forth, right? I had to call a few different people to find the right person, and you can easily mistake that activity for productive activity. You know what I mean? And so I caution you to really, I mean, this comes back to time blocking, which we're not going to talk too much about, but if you're not time blocking your day, then you're just allowing other people to decide what you should be doing when. And it makes it easier to mistake those moments as productive work.
Right. Well, that's when, if people will always fill the time.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Right. If you have two buyers and maybe a listing on the horizon, you can fill your entire week up looking on MLS, sending this, looking at comparables, doing blah blah blah, but somehow if you had 6 buyers, you can fill your whole week up with those 6 buyers. So whatever the hole is, you're going to fill it up with whatever's there. So it's really easy to get off track and,
Yeah, well, that's a really good example of looking for properties for people is not dollar producing activities, but you can feel like it is because
or the researching, right? Like what schools and blah blah blah, and what was the thing, and who, what is there's an easement, and what is blah 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 for a house that somebody asks a question about a house that you don't even have an offer in on. And you're going to go and do all this research on it. It's like when you're supposed to be calling, those open house leads from 3 weeks ago.
Can I go down a rabbit hole for a moment?
Mr. Rabbit, wait! No.
Now, whenever you do that, then I forget what I was going to say. That is one of my biggest pet peeves, and it's only because I've made these mistakes before that I can say like that's annoying that other people do that now. When somebody wants to get information about a property before they've even seen it, and I don't mean school zone, that's easy to look up, but like, how old's the roof? What are are there any permits? Blah, blah, blah. All of the little details about things when they haven't even seen if it works for them.
What are the requirements for the HOA? What is it that and all of a sudden you're on the phone trying to track down HOA docs for a house those people haven't even seen yet, or even if they have seen it, that they're maybe not even interested in putting in an offer, or they don't know that they're running you around
unless there's a specific. So in our buyer consultation, we ask. You go through the series of questions like, yes, you want to know how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, square footage, all of the things that you need to know, location, school zone, all those things. And then we ask, what are your top 5 most important? And so let's say, because I had these people once that they didn't mind being in an HOA, but he had a truck for like a HVAC company that he had to park at his house. And so he couldn't be in a community that wouldn't allow that. So that was part of their top 5 things. Well, then that's a little different, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's one of the major criteria points.
Yes.
For them buying that house. So am I going to take an extra step before I send properties to make sure that he could park his car there? Yes. But I'm also going to work smart, and I'm going to start by trying to find communities that aren't HOA, because most HOAs aren't going to allow that. Right. I just know that off the top of my head. So I'm going to start by telling him and setting expectations. We're probably going to look in neighborhoods that don't have HOAs, because most HOAs are going to have rules about that. So let's start there. And then if we find a house that isn't an HOA that you really like, I'll take the extra step to make sure that you can park your truck there.
Right.
But the point being that if it's not one of their major criteria and they just want a bunch of extra information, it's not that you don't provide the customer service, but that has to come after all of the other important
it's really easy to say
stuff.
It's really easy to say, they texted me last night about it. First thing in the morning, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to do that, and then get sidetracked, and then look up, and then send it to them. Then they send something back, and then you look something else up and send it to them. Now all of a sudden it's 11 o'clock. It's time for lunch, right? You have your
Who's eating lunch?
Well, because you got to start winding down and decide where you're going to go if you're at the office, and then go and get it. It's like every little step of the way. And it's like, but the reality is that none of that mattered. You could have done that. You didn't have to do it first thing in the morning. You could have done that at 4 o'clock the next day. It doesn't like this.
Well, and you can, instead of looking up all of the questions and details and stuff, you could say, you know what, that looks like a great property. Let's schedule a time to go take a look. Mm-hmm. And then we'll get all that information if you like it.
Right.
So that's one of those things though. It's like, none of what we just talked about is dollar producing activity. Not the looking up the properties, not looking up the information, not showing the house.
I could see how people get confused, right? Because it's like, if you're out there and all you have is one buyer, you want to do everything for them. You also want to feel like you're working, right? And so you just do whatever you can whenever you need to do it. Like, and then you chalk it up to, I'm providing a good customer service experience, right? I'm there for them whenever they need it. I can hear people saying this stuff back to us.
But the point is, you can do all of that and still
lead gen
the dollar producing activities. Yeah. You think it takes that long to get all that information, and yet there's agents who do way more deals.
Yeah. Why are
and
you so busy
still
with
get 5-star reviews and provide a great experience?
Why are you so busy with 2 buyers that it's filling up your entire week? Right? I'm so busy. It's got 2 buyers. I don't have time to do lead gen. When there's other agents out there that do 60 sales a year by themselves and provide the same experience, similar experience that you do, like, why? How is that possible? How can somebody else have 3 listings and 2 buyers or 3 buyers and do that if you're so busy with just 2 buyers?
Well, it is like 100%. It's a time management conversation. However, you could still block out your schedule and manage your time really well and still not achieve the results you want, because it's all, what are you putting into the schedule? Yeah. Like when I was writing down my day for today and I wrote it all out, I was like, no, I got to change something, because I wrote out all the things I need to do instead of writing in, here's what the most important activity, right? The 20%, the thing that actually grows the business, the thing that actually generates revenue.
Well, you put this on there.
Well,
this
it's
podcast
super early.
Yeah,
I know this isn't dollar productive.
No,
you guys.
but we are doing this before the workday starts.
Pro bono, yeah, is what you would call this. This is for fun. This gets me energized.
Well, like we said, the sun was coming up, so that's what time we're doing this to get. So it's not being done at 10 o'clock in the morning when she's supposed to be doing something.
Well,
else.
I figure I'm gonna talk to you. And I'm going to talk to you.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to you. And I'm going to talk about real estate.
I know, but we had that coffee this morning. She kept saying, and I went, zip, save it.
Save it for the recording. We might as well record it. But it's so hard, though, to distinguish from like what feels like important and what has to get done and what is really the most important thing. And also the biggest part of that is that you don't want to do the part that needs to get done, and the most important thing, like, you don't want to do it.
Yeah, because there's nothing glamorous or sexy about going through a list and making phone calls and getting hung up on, right? Even if it's people you've met in the past, but sitting there and saying, I'm on MLS looking at $500,000 houses and I'm going to send them off to my buyer, and I get to play real estate agent, like that whole thing and stuff.
Well, I do think that stems from like, don't we all get into the business because we think that there's pretty houses we want to look at? Yeah. I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course. No,
but being able to look around, I'm not an agent, so I don't know, but I can look at it from what I would think, and I think that there is a depending on the house and depending on who your buyers are and stuff, it's like you're window shopping for people. You know what I mean? You get to go and pull a bunch of stuff, and put it in the cart, and then somebody else decides whether or not they want to buy it. Uh-huh. But you get to you're like a personal shopper for people to a certain degree, right? Yeah. Picking out the stuff for them. How fun is that? I want to fill my day with doing those things.
Yeah. Right? Well, and even on the listing side, I mean, not everybody does this, but on the listing side, I oftentimes help people like decide what colors to paint their house and what to do to get it ready for sale, and that can be
I get to be interior designer.
Yeah, it can be fun. Yeah. And so, but again, that's not dollar productive activity. Like, you can take a listing and you can sell a listing, and you do not need to be those people's designer, stager, etc. There are other people who will do that job.
And let's be clear when you say dollar producing, because somebody could say, well, if I didn't do those things, that house wouldn't close or those buyers wouldn't get it. So it is dollar producing. When we say dollar producing, we're talking about getting new leads, new contacts, new appointments for new clients, not that or how.
Well, let's go through.
Well, let's take a break.
Let's take a break, and then let's go through. Like, I'll literally go through like the job duties, right, of a real estate agent and let's see like what's really the dollar producing stuff.
Okay, let's take a break.
The Think Live Be team is an Orlando-based real estate team with Keller Williams Realty at the Parks. We operate as a boutique-style company with the resources of the largest real estate company behind us. Think Live Be is looking for talented people like you to join our team. If you happen to live in the Orlando area and you're a detail-oriented quick learner, then we might have a place for you. Whether you're a real estate agent or administrative professional, we are looking for individuals who are ready to work hard and ready for success. If you're ready to join the team, visit us at thinklivebe.com.
And we're back.
Okay, so one of the things that I have used, and I think it's a really great tool, is if you go to Keller Inc., it's the MREA full list of job duties. You can download this from the resources section, and it gives you an overview of all the job tasks for an agent, and then it breaks it down even further by like level, meaning it's if you're level 1 you're a single agent, level 2 you and one admin, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6, level 7, and it breaks it down. And then it also has the job duties of administrative manager, transaction coordinator, etc. It's got all the stuff. I mean, it's an awesome tool, and you can obviously like change it as you grow a team. You can decide like, well, I'm going to do this job. I'm really good at this. You want to follow a model for building your business, but you should customize it to yourself. Like try to follow it as much as possible, but at the same time, like if you find that you're really good at one thing, like I've been to a lot of classes where people will say that they were, they're the team owner, but they were actually really, really good with buyers. And so they actually were the lead buyer's agent, not the lead listing agent. That's okay. It's all about following the model in terms of compensation and how everything else is run to make it still work. But so you can customize this, but it gives you literally a list of tasks that every agent is going to do. And now keep in mind, it's not everything. Like, for example, it's going to say lead tracking and coordination. It doesn't tell you all the steps that go into that, the systems and things that are the time that it would take to do lead tracking and coordination. It just says the task, lead tracking and coordination. But I'm going to go through, I don't want to read all of them line by line because that might be boring, but it starts with goal. It breaks it down into category 2. So it starts with goal setting, planning, and leadership. And one of the first things is establish mission and vision. I would argue that that's dollar producing because I think that you can't achieve your goals if you don't have a plan. Like you can't get to where you're going without a map and all of the cliche sayings, etc. So I think that that's a dollar producing activity, but it's not a daily activity. It's just something that you need to build into your calendar to plan what your goals are and review them regularly. But it doesn't have to be first thing in the morning every single day.
Yeah.
Although you want to revisit it regularly. Then you get into career visioning, training, coaching, consulting. All of that, if you read the MREA book and you're building a real estate business. Now, let me pause for a second and just say, if you're on a real estate team, you have a job with specific duties, and within those duties, your team owner and you can discuss which ones are dollar producing, but that's going to be pretty easy because you have a specific job.
Yeah, and you're on a team, so you really only have to focus on the dollar producing activities. Everything else,
everything else is leverage.
Right, it's all done for you. That's the whole point of being on a team.
And the example we were talking about with like the buyer has questions about XYZ, those are things that may not be leveraged for you. Like you're still going to be
Correct.
the one to answer those. And that kind of stuff, that little minutia, that's where you can get off track and think that you're working when you're like, oh, I'm so busy, I'm so productive. And that's not really productive work. But if you have a specific job,
that's afternoon work. That's after lunch work.
But I think as a business owner, they say listings, leads, leverage. Those are the 3 things that you have to focus on as a business owner. So what are the dollar producing activities within those things? So career vision, train, coach, and consult. I think within that, when I think about that's the leverage part, I think career vision, that's recruiting. That to me is the dollar producing activity. It's finding the people, finding the talented people to join the team. If you just do that one thing, yes, you still have to coach, consult, and work with them and stuff. But if you just do that one thing, then the rest will fall into place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Well, no, I mean, it does it all. I mean, we've talked about this personally many times, that this is part of your job now, is to recruit and hire agents, because it's the only way that you can get to leverage, and it is dollar producing, because if you hire the right people, they make the sales and stuff. So I do get all of that. That's all true. But for a single agent out there, I don't know if when you're trying to go from single agent to hiring your first buyer's agent and those sorts of things, that messy middle of all of that, I don't know if, and certainly before that, if any of this would be considered dollar producing. I think it gets to a point on the fulcrum where it shifts and it becomes dollar producing. But in the beginning, you're dollar producing, which I always consider anything dollar producing is before noon. Everything else comes after.
Well, I think what you're describing, and they probably talk about it in MREA, I'm confident that they do, is that you should you should lead generate and get clients and customers until you are tapped out, essentially. Like you can't
tapped out by meaning you're so busy,
like you can't do any more production by yourself. Then you need an admin,
right?
And now I would just like step back 1 second. I'm not trying to say that that I know better than anybody else, but I think that you should, before you're too busy, start to think about the hire. If your goal and plan is to have a big organization,
and if you can manage to keep on track, right? Because what happens, you get so busy, you stop lead genning.
Yes,
right.
But that's
and so
my point.
I've got to do all this admin stuff, and so I don't have time to make the calls in the morning. If you're finding yourself not having time because you've got 7 or 8 buyers and a few listing appointments this week, right? And you need an admin.
You know
so
what
that
I just thought
they
of?
can be doing that stuff so that you can do your lead gen. It all comes back to the same thing. Between the hours of 9 a.m. and noon, you are on the phone calling past clients, new leads, database, whatever, open house leads, FSBOs, whatever your main lead sources are, that you are doing that and coveting that and protecting those 4 hours so that nothing gets in the way. Now, when you have the admins and you're hiring buyer's agents, that shifts a little bit, and because you are now hiring people, agents, and training and doing all of those things. And in order for them to be able to be successful for you, for your team, you have to be able to train them. That becomes dollar producing for you by doing that. So things shift a little bit, and there's a weird middle of that. But initially, hiring an admin isn't being done at 10 o'clock in the morning.
But you know what? I was just thinking while you were saying that, and if I could go back in time, now keep in mind, it's kind of early this morning. I may be thinking I've come up with some genius plan and it's not really that great. But I was just thinking about my first hire, and, you know, as we all do, we make the wrong hire, and I hired a part-time person. And I've always said over the years that was a bad decision because I couldn't get a rhythm going with that person.
Instead of it taking 6 months to learn what to do, it takes a year.
But also they just weren't the right fit at all. However, if I think back, if I was really disciplined and I stuck to my lead gen time in the morning, I probably could have hired a part-time admin at least for like a month for them to be trained and still stuck to my lead gen. But what happens is you think that because I still do this to this day, is like,
Mm.
now I think my priority is to train them.
Right.
I feel like I owe some sort of obligation to
I don't
that
want
person.
them to just sit there and not know what to do.
Right, you're
I'm
paying
wasting
them.
money. Yeah.
You're paying them, and you so
Sure.
you shift your priority to, I need to do this.
And then you have to remember, you're paying them however much an hour. How much is your time worth an hour? Your time is worth way more than their time is. So you have to make sure that you do even if they're sitting there doing nothing but twiddling their thumbs.
But that was
you have to do your thing, because that's how the money's coming in.
But that was my genius idea.
What?
Was that? But I should have hired a part-time person, or structured my day. I could have said, okay, I'm going to lead gen from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then I'm going to have that person come in at noon or whatever. I don't know. I would have to figure it out.
Instead of coming in, right. Instead, they came in
at
with
a
their
normal
coffee
start,
at 9 a.m.
And then you all of a sudden feel like, well, I've got to
get them started
and tell them how to do things.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're doing paperwork in your lead gen time.
Right.
Because you're trying to show them how to do things.
And then you get busy because you have an appointment this afternoon or whatever, and now there's no lead gen that happens.
Right.
And then, yes, that's exactly what happens.
Maybe I just came up with something for the next time we hire somebody. Is like, well, no, because see,
we don't
once you
hire
start,
people at part-time anymore. So.
Well, once you have some leverage, then that person should be helping train as well. So because you're supposed to start with an admin that is like your lead admin, and then they help you grow that department. But it's
why Catherine doesn't do any appointments with her agents or with anybody. She doesn't have until after lead gen is done. There's nothing that happens before that.
Well, I'm not perfect. That's not true.
Well, that's the way it's supposed to be.
He's like, what?
What?
This is not what you're supposed to be doing. But it's hard. I mean, this is just that's the point of the podcast, is we're all just trying to do our best every day, and what happens is you truly get this pull that your job is something else, that, oh, I'm supposed to be helping, whether it's a client, like, oh, well, they just texted me, so I better respond to them with the answer to this question, or, oh, I've got a new person that I need to train, so it's my job now to train them, and you all of a sudden shift all of your priorities towards somebody else, and you have to almost be a little bit selfish, and
yeah.
You
have to you have to covet. It's like having, if like admins do so much, but what they don't do is bring in clients and make sales, right? They help leverage to be able to do those things, but if they're quote leveraging and you're not doing those things, they're actually taking away. They're actually that your dynamic is all messed up, and they're actually hurting the business that way. Sure. Right? So if they're there to leverage, and you're deciding to train them instead of lead gen, right? And you're like, well, I want to get them started, and so they know what they're doing, so that eventually they can. Well, what happens when they get 3 months in and it doesn't work out, and you have to fire them, right? Then you didn't lead gen for 3 months because you were too busy training somebody who didn't even work out, right? So you have to covet that stuff, and you give them the time that is necessary, as long as it's not happening during that window of time. Same with clients, same with family, same with everything else. Like when it comes to the lead gen, you have to covet it so much and make sure that nothing gets in the way of it. Your calendar should be blocked out red. Impossible for you to change or add to between the hours of 9 and noon.
So on continuing down the task list, because I agree, there you get into the lead generation, advertising, promotion section, and there's contact management, lead tracking and coordination, designing marketing materials, writing and placing advertising.
There's those. Yeah,
but so here's,
and you can probably put YouTube videos and social media.
So this was built a long time ago, right. So those aren't included in here, but that's all in this section. That's what that is. It's designing marketing materials.
Posting your open house this weekend, or some stupid video that you made out in front of somebody's house saying, "Look at this place," on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, and think that you're lead genning by doing that, is a rookie mistake.
Well, it is because it's this passive thing that number one, I think when it comes down to it, if you can look at everything and if anything can be done by somebody else and probably even done better by somebody else.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't do it.
No, but that's what I'm saying is if you look at something and you say, could somebody else do this and do it just as good or better, then it probably is one of those 80% activities which should be done when the rest of this, when the real true 20% stuff is done.
Yeah.
Then
that's after lunch stuff.
After lunchtime. But what happens if you don't finish those dollar producing activities before lunch? Most people, this is what most people do. And again, I'm not perfect. So
you mean
not pretending I don't.
You're supposed to make 10 contacts and you only make 7. And
right.
And lunch is rolling around.
And then lunch happens.
Well, you go back and you do it and you finish.
But I said I was going to post my social media.
Yeah, none of that matters because the only thing that matters is making the calls. We see what the numbers are. In order to post it to social media, the number of people that you have to touch through that social media, it's not a single thing. No one's going to call on your social media post and say, "Will you list my house?" But we know the numbers of contacts. You make 20 contacts, you set 1 appointment. That's the way it works, right? But with all of this other marketing stuff and everything, it's good to do it. It's like you want to send out. That's why we say when you send out one round of postcards isn't going to get you anything. You have to send out 20 rounds of postcards, 30, 40. Catherine's been doing absentees for years. She got a lead this week from somebody that she's been sending letters to for years and years and years, and they're finally ready and called out of the blue and said, "I've been getting your letters forever," right? It takes forever. So to do that at 10 o'clock in the morning or to do that at noon because you didn't make all 10 of your contacts that you were supposed to make is a fool's errand to do that.
So I think what it is too is like you can kind of break it down to proactive and passive, or what's direct and passive.
Yeah.
Is that the
direct and passive.
Direct and passive. If I'm directly reaching out and proactively reaching out, that's probably what I need to be spending the bulk of my day. That's the activity that's going to have 80% of the results. The other stuff is what Pat just described. Those letters, yes, it only works if you do it consistently. So it does have to happen, but
we're not sending them out and stuffing them in envelopes at 10 o'clock in the morning and saying it's lead gen.
But that's my point, is that if I spent all my time doing those things, think about this, that lead that took 5, 6, 7 years, however long, to finally be ready. If I did those activities, I'd be out of business before the results came in. So you've got to
be able to have the money to be able to pay for those letters.
So I think if you look at the tasks under lead generation, advertising, and promotion, it's not that those aren't important things. Like, you should promote yourself, all those things, but they just need to fall under they're not the thing that's going to have the biggest outcome. They're just not. They will have an outcome. They will have results if you do things consistently, but they're not going to have as much of an impact as the things that you have direct control over, which is getting out in front of people and having conversations. And I know nobody wants to hear that that's like what you're supposed to be doing in real estate.
No, of course not. It's why when I check the analytics for this show, the most listened to episodes are all about where do I get leads?
And then they listen and they're like,
well,
wow.
Yeah, because people think that they want to know the magic sauce, right?
Can I tell you the magic sauce? I'll tell you the secret to everything.
Here, that's going to be the title of the episode, The Secret to Everything.
And then you've got to listen to however far we're into the episode.
Yes. So now if you listen to this, right, and now you're going to hear it. It took 48 minutes. The secret to everything. To everything is just don't quit. Right. But you also need to be doing the right activities. Or do the right activities. It doesn't matter. And just don't quit. Just don't quit. Yeah, because you have to build two things you have to build. You have to build the calluses, mental calluses that say, first day you decide to get on that Peloton isn't very fun. You don't see any
Hurts
results.
your butt.
It hurts your butt. And then it takes, so you got to build the calluses so that you don't care anymore. That's the first thing. And then the other thing is it takes that long to have that many fishing lines in the water. Right? If you want to catch 1,000 fish, you don't just say, well, I'll just add more time to my day and just throw one line in. You start adding more lines. So in order to have 1,000 lines in the water, it takes years of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then somebody that you've been sending letters to for 5 years all of a sudden calls and says, I'm ready to list.
That's
right?
that. And that's that like that lucky thing that and I shouldn't say that's not luck, but it's that you do those things, like Pat says, after lunch activities. You do those things, you block time for those things, and you let them simmer and keep working behind the scenes while you proactively go out and spend most of your time directly working on prospecting.
Yeah, they're two separate things.
Because the direct, like we said, the direct conversations will have the biggest results, and everything else will still have outcomes if you do them and you do them over time and stuff. And it could even lead to becoming one of the most powerful things.
Yeah.
And then it switches gears.
If you have 1,000 lines in the ocean, you're one of those things. All of a sudden, every time you throw the line in, you get a bite. Well, maybe we should throw 2 or 3 more lines in that have the same bait on them, right? It's like,
well, so let me give you an example of like farming, for example. That's a lead generation source. And if you're going to, let's say you're going to start a farm and you're going to start mailing postcards
or door knock.
Let's say you're going to mail postcards, door knock,
right.
And you're going to do seasonal events, and that's your farming strategy. Well, all that stuff has to happen. It's lead generation activities, and yet it will have a slow result.
Right.
So if you want to stay in business, that can't be the thing that you do every morning.
It's why we cringe every time we hear about an agent saying, well, I'm going to just send out this last ditch effort of postcards and wait for the phone to ring. Because we know that that's not going to work, and they're wasting their last $500 on sending out postcards.
But what I would suggest, though, is like start that as an afternoon activity. Mm-hmm. And then as it starts to bring results and you see and decide like, okay, if I add phone calls to it, all of a sudden these results, the outcomes are more powerful. Then all of a sudden you can shift those activities into the morning. Because now you've got direct ways to impact that lead gen effort. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But that's a very slippery slope.
Well, no, it's not. Yeah. You just make fun. Just add in the call activity. It's the part about
the call.
It's the part about right. the active part of it.
Yeah.
You've got the passive part that you do. That's after lunch activities.
But the call
can happen because the direct.
Yeah, because
the door knocking, one would say, would be the morning activity too. Because number one, it's 1,000,000 degrees in the afternoon. Number two,
except you're not getting
is face to face activity. I just have always found, like, again, I don't door knock.
It's too hot. It's too hot here.
It's too hot here
to do it with the consistency.
I am not saying that it doesn't work, but
you live in the middle of the country where right now it's you wake up in the morning and it's 60 degrees. You can go do your door knocking at any time, right? But in Florida right now it's 8 o'clock in the morning and it's 92 degrees outside with 100% humidity. By mid-afternoon today, if you wanted to do your door knocking after lunch, it would be feels like temperature of 105, and they tell you don't go outside.
It feels like you're in a hot dryer.
Yeah,
outside right now.
Or like you know when the alarm goes off on the dishwasher
and
you immediately open it up when you're bent over, and then you get hit with that. That's what it feels like when you open the door. So here you can't do the door knocking the way you can in other parts of the country.
But you know what? I think that is the same thing as like, if you're building your morning and you're saying, okay, the morning time, because eat that frog, do the hard stuff first. The morning time is going to be the time that you set aside for the active activities that generate the 80% of results. That's your time to do that activity. Then you would start with the most likely to convert first, and then slowly move to the door knocking. So I explain this to buyer's agents on the team. Like, first you're going to call, first of all, like, hit your sphere first. Don't ever miss calling the sphere. Never miss those people. That is the most important part of everything. That's the other secret.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. Everybody says it. Nobody does it.
It's every episode.
But hit the sphere first. Make sure you don't miss those people. Then move on to the hot leads. Unless there was truly a lead that came in, then call that, right away, speed to the lead.
Yes, always.
But if you're just waking up, it's time to get started. Call your sphere people. Call the hottest leads you have. Then call the colder leads that maybe you met a week or two ago at an open house and that you have tasks due. And then when you run out of people, then you move to the colder leads. So in our situation, we have the lead pool. Then you move to the colder people so that you can have enough conversations. So the same thing would be if door knocking is a listing strategy for you, then who are you going to call first? This would fall into, by the way, if you're on the MREA job duties list, the next section is seller prospecting and servicing. And it starts with prospecting for listings, expireds, FSBOs, farm, past clients and allied resources, lead follow-up. All of that is that active action that you're taking. So if you're prospecting for listings, then you'd start the morning calls with hit your sphere and your past clients, your core people that if they don't hear from you, you're not going to get referral-based business. Then you hit your expireds, your FSBOs, the people who are most likely to do real estate business because they've said, hey, I need to sell my house. Then you would do the farm door knocking.
Mm-hmm.
Not and if you shift it in the morning because it's hot outside, that's fine. But then you have to commit that time for that activity because it's the only thing.
If you're and I'm a stickler, so I would say as soon as you start shifting things, that's when you're messing up. You're changing the recipe right off the top, and it's real easy to get off track by doing that, especially if you are not the type of person who can stick to a schedule. If you have an issue with sticking to a schedule, don't say, well, I'm just going to do this in the morning because it's nice outside, so I'm going to do it then, and I'll make sure I do the other stuff later. Some people can do that. If you know that's not
most people, I don't think I've ever met anybody that can do that. So I'm going to say most people have a hard enough time sticking to a schedule that don't try and move things around. Just like who are your people you're going to call, set it, and make sure it gets done before you answer another phone call or email. And I think one of the things that I remember, I've probably said on this podcast, but I remember years ago, I was reading an article and this woman gave her schedule to her clients. I think that's such a good idea, but I've never done it personally, but I think it's such a good idea to show them in the mornings, I am looking for people. I'm looking for buyers for your listing and sellers for our buyers.
Super laid back, or not laid back, a super simplified version of just the day time blocked out.
Right. Not, you don't have to say, I'm here at this time and you know where I am.
It also makes them say when 7:00 rolls around and they're talking and they're like, well, just why don't you just call Catherine and see what she says? Well, they have the little card that says 6:00, I'm done. Time with family. Yeah. Right. It's like that. It's a very good idea to do something like that. I can't believe that you don't have that.
I know. I've never done it, but I think it's just those are the people who are going to want your time. So you might as well explain to them how it's spent,
how it's going to work. Yeah.
And when would be the time for them to reach out. And then for the most part, they probably will follow that.
People don't want you to be available 24/7. I know people say that. What they want is to know when you're available. So you give them that. Yeah. You tell them how things are going to work. They want to be led. They want to feel safe, and that they have, and that you have you have a shroud over them, protecting them, right? So you tell them when you're available. You tell them when you're not available. You have all of that ahead of time so that they're not left wondering. As long as they're not left wondering, you're going to provide the customer service that they want.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. They don't ever want to have to say, well, I don't know when she's going to call me back. I don't know when she's available. I haven't talked to her. The solution for that is not, I'm always available. It's giving them the information of when you're available.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The rest of the it's seller prospecting and servicing. So I listed off like the prospecting is that active dollar producing stuff, and then everything else, research and prepare a CMA, not dollar producing. I mean, it needs to get done. Like in order to best help them, it has to get done. And yet you can teach somebody else how to do that. So if you can leverage it and somebody else could do it just as well or better, then it's, and I would argue that nobody can for me, but it just, it's not that proactive action to grow the business. Mm-hmm. Therefore it's something that is after lunchtime. Right. Then you've got buyer prospecting and servicing. Well, it's the same thing I said. I teach the buyer's agents. It's the first part of the day after script and role play should be about actively reaching out and having conversations about real estate. That will have, if you just do that from 9 to noon, that will have the biggest outcomes possible. But if instead you start looking at MLS and looking for properties for sale for people, and you end up spending 3 hours doing that or respond, and the thing is that you never think that it's as long as you spent doing it. You're like, oh no, I just made a couple calls about this inspection issue, and then I looked for a couple properties, and then all of a sudden it's lunchtime, and then like you said, you get, well, now there's a showing, and now there's this, and so all of a sudden that lead gen didn't happen. And if you allow that to happen day after day after day, well, the outcomes that you're looking for will not happen. They simply can't, because you didn't do the actions that are required. Yeah. It's that simple. So, and then you get into like obviously prospecting for buyers, going on the consultation. That's a dollar producing. The appointment itself is dollar producing. You have to be in front of the person, right? It's an active conversation. You have to be in front of them in order to take them as a client. So all of those appointments for the consultation are absolutely dollar producing. I don't think showing homes is. I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be done. You have to be able to show them homes. I just don't think that it's dollar producing. And you can easily eat up a lot of time if you're not careful.
And they are the appointments are dollar producing, but at the same time, why would you want to schedule those during your lead gen time? Why wouldn't you just schedule those in the after lunch time and still protect the actual real dollar producing, and then have bonus dollar producing in the afternoon of my list of my buyer's appointments? Well,
you know what, in the MREA book, and I'll misquote this because it's towards the beginning, but they talk about you always go for more leads than you think you need. Go for more leads than you think you need, because first of all, you never know, the market will shift, and then you'll have enough. Or if you have too many to handle, well, then we just hire more people, right? So never settle. So that's what that is like your appointment. You don't know that you're going to take that consultation. You don't know that you're going to take that client or that customer. So you can't interrupt the new business stuff to have an appointment with somebody that may not work out.
Right.
Now, that's still dollar producing.
But you don't do it during.
But you can separate it. I love this before lunch, after lunch. Before lunch activities are new business, and it's the most important thing.
Right.
Get new leads, follow up with leads, convert.
The good thing about before lunch and after lunch is after lunch, you could get to decide how long that day goes. Mm-hmm. Right. If it has to go to 6:30 because you have showings in the afternoon or whatever, fine. Before lunch is a finite amount of time. It starts at 9, it ends at noon, right? It's you're done. At noon, you're done. Now, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, getting 10 leads, or I'm sorry, not 10 leads, getting your whatever your contacts are, 10 contacts, you know you can do that every single day because nothing else is getting in the way of that. So this whole thing of I only got 7, so I'll do the next 3 after lunch. really should never happen unless you get trapped on the phone with somebody that you haven't talked to in a long time or whatever. It should be so rare that it doesn't fall into the 80-20 thing of like, this is supposed to work 80% of the time. You shouldn't have any issues, right? It's like, it should, and the only way that happens is if you covet that time and make sure that nothing else is going on then. Everything else happens after lunch. All your coffee dates and well, just because that person is in your sphere, you don't meet them for coffee at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. You meet them in the afternoon. Everything happens. The only thing that's happening between 9 and 12 is you calling and contacting the people that you need to call and contact.
I agree. And I mean, because I've been in it for so long, I know that is easier said than done.
It is, but you're trying to do it 80% of the time.
But my point is just, I get it. Like, I hear all of you who are like, but I can't keep that schedule because I have so many other things. I get it. And imagine, like, the best times in my business have always been when I've been consistent with my morning.
Sure.
Like, if I just focus on consistency between 9 and 12 o'clock every single day, it shows up.
Yeah. And then when it starts to get crazy, which it will, because guess what? It works. You have to stick with it. You can't let the busyness of your day get in the way of the lead gen between 9 and 12.
And that's when you really notice, like,
now we're back around to the beginning of the episode.
If you feel really busy, but you're not seeing pending contracts, and it feels like, well, I made all these calls and contacts and I took all these clients and I'm not seeing pendings and stuff. This is where you start to understand the importance of qualifying and making sure that you're spending your time wisely
with the right appointments that you're setting. But that is also how you do this, right? Is you start to see these are all numbers, right? You talk to 20 people, you set one appointment, right? You should have an 80 to 90% rate of those leads, of those appointments showing up, right? If you're seeing that I'm setting all these appointments and people aren't showing up to my appointments, then you know that there's a problem with qualifying. If you get to the appointments and then they say, I don't want to work with you, then you know that there's an issue in your scripts in getting people to sign your engagement letter. All the way down, you can see where your problems are, but you have to be consistent with the number of calls that you're making so that you can see where your deficiencies are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, you can't right the ship if you don't know, like, what you did to get to that point.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm not as good with analogies as you are. But the rest of the tasks, I'll just real quick, the transaction and closing coordination, a whole bunch of stuff in there, none of which is dollar productive, and yet it all has to get done. So if you're the one doing it, well, you've got to work quickly and have good systems in place, like canned responses and things like that. Before I ever hired an admin, I had built out canned responses and a system and process for everything that helped me move more quickly through things because I was having to do it all.
And it's why it's so important when you don't have a closing tomorrow for you to today do that lead gen between 9 and 12 and don't let anything get in your way, because at some point you're going to have a closing tomorrow and the S is going to hit the fan and you're going to have to do something at 10 o'clock in the morning to make sure that deal doesn't fall apart. And it's going to have to happen at that time, and there's just no way around it and stuff. It's why it was so important for you to make those calls yesterday instead of going out to breakfast with your friend.
Well, that is the key, right? If you just understand that life shows up and there are things that are going to get in your way. So on the days where there's no reason that you shouldn't be doing that, don't allow other people to dictate what you're doing.
Because you're going to get screwed later in the week.
Yeah.
When there is something, and now all of a sudden the whole week went by, I didn't do any lead gen.
Or like you wake up, it's not even just business stuff, because most of the time the business stuff is not an emergency. You just think it is.
Right.
But what happens if you break down on the side of the road?
Right. Yeah.
That your morning is going to get messed up.
Yeah. You got a leaky pipe and now the plumber's got to come. Right. There's a million things that can get in the way.
Yeah. The rest of the stuff, just real quick, is administration and accounting, as you can imagine. all of that is not 20%. It's not the stuff that creates the 80% outcomes. It's just like stuff that has to happen for businesses, but it can be leveraged. It can be outsourced. It can be done at 7:00 while you're watching TV. Research and communication, answering telephone messages, checking voicemail. I think this is the biggest culprit of everything.
I'm calling somebody back that was interested in something. So they haven't maybe signed the paperwork yet, but they called whatever. Let me call them back and see what's.
Well, that sounds like
something's on fire.
Well, that sounds like it might be important. I'm talking about title, lender.
Oh, geez. Yeah. I didn't even think about that because that's so far
co-op
away.
Agents. Somebody calls because they want information about the listing, but you call them back and you realize that they actually just wanted to show the property, and instead of clicking showing time and just scheduling it themselves, they called you and didn't follow the instructions. Those are things, though, that can be leveraged and dealt with at a later time. Don't interrupt your most productive activity because somebody else can't follow instructions. Even if it feels like it's this pull, like, but there's a voicemail, I got to do it. So anyways, it's, again, easier said than done. But if you could just imagine a life where you just focused on the most important activities from 9 to noon.
Before lunch and after lunch.
Before lunch, you just did your most important work. Like, what would your life look like? I'm just pondering that in my head. If I could just do that one thing.
All right. Well, we're
running over.
Yeah, we're gonna run over, but let's go ahead and do the next segment. Okay.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the question you are about to hear is true. Only the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Questions from the web. I'm a new realtor, 6-ish months. I just started getting listings and had my first closing last month. I am constantly stressed out. Stressed out that I'm not going to know the answers. Stressed out that I'm going to mess something up. Stressed that I'm going to get into trouble by making a mistake. Stressed by all the uncertainty. Did you feel this way too?
Oh my goodness. Gosh, I don't really think that I did. I want to give this person like some comfort, but
it's okay to not know the answers.
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
The first thing.
It's okay to not know the answers.
Nobody expects you to know the answer to everything. And of course, as you get to the point, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years down the road, you will know all the answers. You'll be one of those people that the new agents come to and say, hey, what about this?
But I think if you're this stressed and you feel like you don't know the answers and you're going to get yourself into trouble and blah, 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 it sounds to me, and maybe this is not right, maybe you're just like a very anxious person, but it sounds to me like you probably don't have the support you need at your brokerage. Yeah. And maybe you should think about, like, number one, maybe you're just not plugging into that support. Maybe it exists and you're just not doing your part to make sure that you are educated.
Yeah. Any good brokerage is going to have resources for a 6-month in agent to be able to ask questions, to be able to have the knowledge behind you to be able to help you with any of those things so you don't feel that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, but every brokerage is different. So if you don't feel that way, then that's maybe a sign that you don't have the tools and resources that you need.
Try not to. Hopefully you're not at like a virtual brokerage.
Well, that's the thing. Like, sometimes people make decisions about where they want to work based on the wrong reasons. Wrong reasons being, well, I don't have to go into the office. There's no desk fees. There's no my commission split. Yeah, my commission split is higher, or you're going to earn more of a split. But what that means is that in doing that, if a brokerage is a business, if your split is higher, it is probably because there's not enough tools and resources. I'm not saying that's 100% true, because then there's places like Keller Williams has a very good split system, and yet you have the best training in the world. I guarantee that it's been voted the best training in the world. And so you can join an organization that has good, fair, reasonable splits, but also has all the resources because they're the biggest company in the world. So they're able to provide that and still offer competitive compensation. But you just understand that if you're feeling that way, you either need a coach, a mentor, a better brokerage with more support, and you need to probably take more training and classes than you are, and go look for things. And that's afternoon. That's after lunch.
No morning
activities.
classes.
After lunch activities.
Catherine teaches classes too. Like in her brokerage, she'll teach classes on listings, or what's the last, you do a lot of like money. Like
I did budget like a boss.
And stuff like that, but not first thing in the morning, because you're not going to take away that time for other agents when they should be lead genning, and more importantly, her time when she should be lead genning.
Yeah.
So if you see somebody doing a class in the morning, don't take that one. Only do the afternoon
Maybe
ones.
that's good advice.
Small win. Catherine, do you have a small win this week?
Well, I guess just I hung out with my good local friend. We'll call her. She's one of my best friends, but I don't see her that often, even though she lives here and not that far away.
Yeah, life gets in the way.
I don't know if I've seen her since like Christmas. And we went and did a little stroll around a small town nearby in Central Florida, and it was a lot of fun.
And it was one that you had never been to. We thought we've kind of been everywhere. But
yeah, it was something we've never been to, and it was super cute, and just had a really nice day. It was 1,000,000 degrees outside, but we cooled off with lots of beverages. I had a lemonade with ginger. I had a coconut water, a freshly squeezed coconut water. I was like, why am I drinking so many beverages? Oh yeah, it's 1,000,000 degrees outside.
Look at you, you're fancy. And then mine is we got back from our Airbnb in North Carolina. We went up for just like 4 days.
We felt like we needed to check on it.
Just to check on it, because we had it for a month and people had been staying there and everything. But we got to go up and kind of enjoy it and like actually stay there. We didn't have too many chores to do, and we got to just kind of hang out and live there for a few days, and it was awesome, and I loved it. And it was like a really nice way to kind of get out of the heat and just relax for a few days. I didn't have a computer. All I had was my phone, so I couldn't do any design work or anything. It forced me to not do stuff, and it was awesome.
Still found a way to plant some plants.
We still went to a nursery, and I went to Home Depot and I bought a shovel and a rake and fertilizer and stuff, and I got to learn all about the fauna in a different climate. It's awesome. I love it. Hey guys, remember to rate and review us on iTunes. It really helps new listeners to find us. Send your questions from the web to onseekingthebest@gmail.com. Leave us a Spotify voicemail with your questions and we'll play it on the show. All info is in the show notes. And for Kat and myself, thanks for listening, and we'll figure this all out next week.
Bye.
This has been a Think Live Be production.